Keanu Reeves stepped out of the sleek black SUV, his hand clutching a grocery bag as a cold breeze tugged at his jacket. The night had fallen early, draping the supermarket parking lot in shadows while dim streetlights flickered uncertainly. It had been a long day, full of meetings and script readings. But this small routine, grocery shopping on his own, was something that kept him grounded. He liked blending into normal life whenever he could, feeling just a bit more human. As he walked across the parking lot, his eyes caught sight of something unusual. A battered old car parked way in the far corner. The windows were fogged up, and clothes were draped across the back seat, hanging like faded, worn-out curtains. Keanu hesitated for a moment, his instincts on high alert. Something about the car just didn't sit right. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it wasn't his business. But then he saw movement inside the car, a faint silhouette shifting, almost like someone trying to get comfortable. His heart sank when he realized it wasn't just one person. There was a small, hunched figure cradling something. No, someone. A baby. Keanu took a deep breath, willing himself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe they were just resting. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But deep down, he knew better. Ignoring that gnawing feeling wasn't an option. He approached slowly, his steps careful not to startle whoever was inside. As he got closer, he saw the woman, young, exhausted-looking, with tangled hair and dark circles under her eyes. She was holding a tiny bundle, wrapped in mismatched blankets. Gently, Keanu tapped on the window. The woman flinched, her body stiffening as if bracing for something bad. She turned her face toward him, eyes wide and fearful. Keanu immediately took a step back, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "Hey," he said softly, his voice warm and reassuring. "I'm sorry if I scared you. I just wanted to check if you're okay." The woman didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted around, clearly calculating whether it was safe to respond. Finally, she cracked the window just enough to speak. "I'm fine," she mumbled, though her tone was far from convincing. Keanu gave a small nod, careful not to push too much. "I know it's none of my business, but is there anything you need? Food? Water? Anything for the baby?" Her jaw tightened, and she looked away, clutching the baby closer. "We're fine," she repeated, though her voice cracked just a little. Keanu hesitated, unsure of how to help without making her feel threatened. "Okay," he said gently. "I'll be right over there if you change your mind." He pointed to his SUV parked a few spaces away. The woman gave a quick, almost imperceptible nod before huddling back down, her face buried against the baby's head. Keanu lingered near his car, his mind racing with thoughts. Something wasn't right. No mother should be sleeping in a freezing car with a baby. His instincts screamed at him to do something, but he knew that just barging in with help might scare her off completely. He opened the trunk of his SUV, grabbing a couple of things, a blanket and a sealed bottle of water. Walking back to the old car, he placed them on the hood, making sure they were clearly visible. He didn't knock or speak this time, just left the small offering and retreated back to his car. From his seat, he watched as the woman hesitantly peered out. Her hand slowly reached out, grabbing the water and the blanket. Keanu couldn't help but notice how fast she tucked the items inside, almost as if worried someone might take them away. It twisted his heart to see her that way, so guarded, so fragile. A few moments later, the baby let out a soft, muffled cry, and Keanu noticed the woman rocking it gently, her lips moving as if whispering soothing words. He couldn't hear what she was saying, but the pain on her face was unmistakable. As the night stretched on, Keanu stayed parked nearby, unable to convince himself to leave. He kept thinking about how he could help without overwhelming her. Maybe if he came back tomorrow with something more, baby supplies, food, something that wouldn't make her feel trapped. He pulled out his phone, hesitating before dialing a number. One of his close friends ran a local shelter. and he knew they could at least offer her a safe place to stay. As the call rang, he glanced back at the car, wondering how someone could end up in such a heartbreaking situation. The phone picked up, and Keanu explained briefly what he had seen, asking if the shelter could make room for a young mother and her baby, just in case she was willing to accept help. His friend agreed without hesitation, promising to keep things discreet and respectful. After ending the call, Keanu sighed, rubbing his forehead as he considered his next move. Maybe tomorrow, he could find a way to gain her trust, show her that he wasn't just some random guy intruding on her life. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story, something deeper, something that would explain why she was out here alone, fighting to survive with nothing but sheer determination. As he finally started his SUV and drove away, he couldn't help but glance back one last time. The old car sat there, still and silent, with the faintest hint of movement inside. Keanu's mind was already forming a plan, determined to find a way to help without making her feel cornered. This wasn't just a random encounter. Something in his gut told him it was meant to happen, and he couldn't just walk away. The next morning, Keanu couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. He knew he had to go back, at least to make sure the woman and her baby were safe. After a restless night, he grabbed some essentials from his house: baby formula, diapers, some snacks, and a few bottles of water. Stuffing them into a canvas bag, he couldn't help but wonder what circumstances had pushed her into living out of a car. As he pulled into the same parking lot, his eyes immediately darted to the far corner. Relief washed over him when he saw the old car still there. The woman was sitting on the driver's seat, her head leaned back against the headrest, while the baby was bundled up on her lap. Even from a distance, Keanu could see the exhaustion etched on her face. Taking a deep breath, he made his way over, careful not to startle her. He stopped a few feet away, making sure she could see him coming. "Good morning," he called out softly. The woman opened her eyes abruptly, clearly startled, but when she recognized him, her shoulders relaxed just a little. Keanu raised the bag slightly. "I brought a few things, just in case you needed them," he said. "No pressure." She hesitated, glancing at the bag and then back at him. For a moment, it looked like she was about to refuse, but something shifted in her expression. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Keanu carefully set the bag down on the hood of her car and stepped back to give her space. Curiosity getting the better of him, he cautiously asked, "How long have you been out here?" The woman looked down, as if ashamed to answer. "A few weeks," she mumbled. "I lost my job. Couldn't keep up with rent." Keanu's heart sank. "I'm sorry to hear that," he replied gently. "Is there anyone you can call for help?" She shook her head, brushing away a stray tear. "No family. No one to turn to." Keanu felt a pang of sadness, realizing how isolated she truly was. "If you're okay with it, I know a place that could help. Just for a few nights. Get you and the baby somewhere warm and safe." Her lips pressed into a thin line, clearly struggling with the idea of accepting help. After a long pause, she whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Keanu hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because I can't just walk away. Sometimes, helping isn't about knowing someone. It's about doing what's right." The woman looked at him, her guarded expression softening just a bit. She didn't say yes, but she didn't refuse either. Keanu gave her a reassuring nod and stepped back, knowing he had planted a seed of trust. As he walked away, he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. He knew he had to tread carefully. Pushing too hard might make her retreat, but leaving her alone wasn't an option. Determined to make a difference, he vowed to return the next day and see if her walls had come down just a little more. The next day, Keanu returned to the parking lot, his mind racing with thoughts about how to approach her without making her feel overwhelmed. This time, he brought along a small thermos of hot chocolate and some fresh pastries from a local bakery. He figured a warm drink might help break the ice, especially on such a chilly morning. As he approached the car, he noticed the woman sitting upright, trying to feed the baby a half-empty bottle of formula. The baby fussed and turned away, clearly not satisfied. Keanu's heart clenched at the sight. Whatever little they had was clearly not enough. He cleared his throat gently to announce his presence, and she looked up, startled, but slightly less wary than before. "Morning," Keanu greeted with a soft smile. He held up the thermos and bag. "Thought you might like something warm to drink. And I brought a few pastries, if that's okay." She hesitated, but eventually gave a faint nod. Taking that as a good sign, Keanu placed the items on the hood and stepped back, giving her space to decide. After a moment, she reached out cautiously, her fingers trembling as she picked up the thermos. She took a tentative sip, and for the first time, Keanu thought he saw a hint of relief on her face. "Thank you," she murmured, barely loud enough to hear. Keanu nodded, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. "You're welcome. I know it's not much, but I figured something warm might help." He noticed her glancing at the pastries, but hesitating to take one. He gave her a gentle smile. "They're fresh. You and the little one could use some energy." Finally, she reached into the bag and took a pastry, breaking off a small piece and nibbling on it. The baby cooed softly, as if sensing the brief moment of comfort. Keanu leaned against the side of his SUV, maintaining a respectful distance. "Mind if I ask your name?" He ventured carefully. She hesitated, clearly debating whether to answer. Finally, she spoke. "It's Sarah." "That's a beautiful name," Keanu replied warmly. "And your little one?" She glanced down at the baby, her eyes softening. "Liam," she whispered. Keanu's chest tightened at the tenderness in her voice. "That's a strong name," he commented, genuinely meaning it. Sarah didn't respond, but he could see the faintest hint of a smile tug at her lips. Taking a slow breath, Keanu spoke softly, not wanting to push too hard. "You know, if you ever decide you're ready for some help, I know people who can make sure you both are safe. No pressure, just an option." Sarah looked away, chewing her lip nervously. It was clear she was terrified of trusting anyone, and Keanu couldn't blame her. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't know how to get out of this." Keanu nodded, his heart aching for her. "Sometimes, the hardest part is just taking the first step. But you're not alone, okay? I'll be around if you decide you're ready." As Sarah gave a faint nod, Keanu knew he had made a small breakthrough. Trust was fragile, but it was building. He couldn't walk away now, not when hope was starting to flicker in her eyes, even just a little. The following morning, Keanu couldn't get Sarah and baby Liam out of his mind. He knew he needed to do more, but rushing her would only make things worse. Deciding to take a gentle approach, he swung by a nearby store and picked up a few more essentials: baby wipes, fresh diapers, and a pack of soft baby blankets. He also grabbed a small teddy bear, hoping it might bring a little comfort to Liam. When he arrived at the parking lot, he saw Sarah standing outside the car, stretching her back while cradling Liam. The dark circles under her eyes looked deeper than ever, and her thin jacket did little to protect her from the cold. Keanu stepped out of his SUV, keeping his movements calm and unthreatening. "Morning, Sarah," he greeted, giving her a gentle nod. She looked up, surprised but not as tense as before. "Hi," she replied softly, adjusting Liam in her arms. Keanu walked closer and held up the shopping bag. "Brought a few things for Liam. Hope that's all right." She hesitated for a moment, clearly struggling with her pride, but eventually gave a small nod. Keanu handed her the bag, watching as she peeked inside. Her fingers brushed over the baby wipes, and she let out a shaky breath. This means a lot," she whispered. Keanu smiled gently. "He deserves to be comfortable. You both do." For a moment, Silence settled between them, and Keanu could see the fight in her eyes. The battle between wanting to protect her pride and needing help. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight with emotion. "You don't even know us. Why are you doing all this?" Keanu looked her straight in the eyes, his expression sincere. "Because sometimes life kicks us down, and it's easy to feel forgotten. No one should have to go through that alone. I've been in dark places too, and I know how much just a little kindness can change everything." Sarah swallowed hard, clearly moved, but still cautious. I don't want to be a burden," she said, almost as if convincing herself more than him. "You're not a burden," Keanu assured her. "You're just a mom trying to survive, and that's nothing to be ashamed of." Liam fussed a little, and Sarah rocked him gently, brushing a hand over his tiny head. Keanu watched the tenderness in her movements, his heart heavy with compassion. "You know," he said softly, "there's a shelter nearby that can give you a warm place to sleep and proper meals. They can also help with finding work and daycare for Liam. Just think about it." Sarah bit her lip, clearly torn. The thought of relying on strangers seemed terrifying, but the idea of warmth and safety was almost too tempting to ignore. Keanu didn't push further. Instead, he gave her a reassuring nod and took a step back. "I'll be around," he promised, "whenever you're ready." As he walked back to his car, he glanced over his shoulder and saw Sarah still standing there, staring at the bag with a look of disbelief and cautious hope. Keanu knew that convincing her wouldn't be easy, but he wasn't about to give up. Trust took time, and he was willing to give her all the time she needed. The next day, Keanu returned to the parking lot earlier than usual, hoping to catch Sarah before she moved the car to another spot. To his relief, the old car was still there, parked in the same corner. This time, Sarah was sitting in the front seat with Liam cradled against her chest, his tiny hand gripping her worn-out sweater. Keanu could see the exhaustion on her face as she gently rocked him back and forth. He approached slowly, giving a small wave to let her know it was just him. She nodded slightly, her guard still up, but not as tense as before. Keanu leaned against his SUV, keeping a respectful distance. "How's Liam doing today?" he asked gently. Sarah glanced down at her son, brushing her fingers over his soft hair. "He's okay. Just tired and hungry," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu's heart clenched. "I brought a few more things," he said, lifting another bag from his car. "Some baby formula, snacks for you, and a few things to keep Liam warm." This time, Sarah didn't hesitate as much. She reached out and took the bag, peeking inside with a faint look of relief. "You really didn't have to do all this," she mumbled. Keanu gave a gentle shrug. "I wanted to. No one should be out here in the cold like this." Silence hung between them for a moment before Sarah finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never thought I'd end up here." Keanu could see the pain in her eyes, the way she was fighting to keep herself composed. He took a cautious step closer, careful not to invade her space. "Sometimes, life hits harder than we can handle," he said softly. "But that doesn't mean it's the end. There's always a way out." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, and she quickly wiped them away, ashamed of her vulnerability. "I tried," she whispered. "I tried everything. But it all just fell apart." Keanu nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You don't have to do this alone," he assured her. "I know it's hard to trust, but I'm here to help. Just let me know how." Sarah hesitated, her hands shaking as she held the baby formula. I don't know how to start over," she admitted. "Everything just keeps going wrong." Keanu took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "One step at a time," he said. "Just let someone help carry the weight for a while. You don't have to figure it all out right now." A single tear slipped down her cheek, and she looked away, clearly overwhelmed. Keanu didn't push any further, Instead, he gave her a reassuring smile and stepped back toward his car. "I'll check in tomorrow," he promised. "Take care of yourself and Liam." As he drove away, Keanu couldn't help but feel the heaviness in his chest. He knew Sarah's pride was holding her back, but he also saw a flicker of hope, a tiny crack in the wall she had built around herself. He just had to keep showing up, keep proving that not everyone walked away when things got tough. He wasn't giving up on her. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, Keanu pulled into the parking lot once again, his mind racing with ideas on how to approach Sarah differently this time. As he stepped out of his SUV, he noticed something different. The car was empty. Panic shot through him as he hurried closer, only to see a folded piece of paper taped to the inside of the fogged-up window. Carefully peeling it off, he unfolded it and read the shaky handwriting. "Thank you for everything. I can't keep relying on a stranger's kindness. It's not fair to you. I'm trying to figure it out on my own. Please don't worry about us. Sarah." Keanu swallowed hard, his mind spinning. She was gone. He couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, wondering if he had pushed too hard or made her feel pressured. Frustration and helplessness flooded his chest, but he refused to give up that easily. Quickly dialing his friend at the shelter, he explained the situation, asking if anyone matching Sarah's description had come by. Unfortunately, there was no sign of her. Determined not to let this be the end, Keanu drove around nearby neighborhoods and parks, scanning every corner for any trace of her. Hours passed without success, and the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon when he finally spotted the familiar old car parked near a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. Relief washed over him, and he pulled up behind her. Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, he approached cautiously, not wanting to scare her off again. He knocked softly on the window, and after a tense moment, Sarah's face appeared, pale and worn, but undeniably relieved to see him. Keanu gave a gentle smile, trying to hide the worry that had eaten at him all day. "I was worried about you," he said quietly. Sarah looked down, guilt flickering across her face. "I didn't mean to make you worry. I don't know how to do this anymore." Keanu took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. "You don't have to do it alone," he said firmly. "I get it. You're scared of feeling like a burden. But sometimes, accepting help isn't weakness, it's strength." Her lip quivered as she looked at Liam sleeping soundly in the back seat. "I'm just so tired," she whispered. "I don't even know where to start." Keanu's heart ached at her vulnerability. "Let me help you start," he urged gently. "There's a place where you and Liam can stay, safe, warm, and with people who want to help. No judgment, no strings attached, just a chance to breathe and figure things out." Sarah hesitated, her hands trembling as she glanced at Liam and then back at Keanu. Slowly, she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Okay," she whispered, "but I'm scared." Keanu gave her a reassuring smile, reaching out to rest a comforting hand on the car door. "That's okay. You're allowed to be scared. Just don't let it stop you from taking the first step." After a long pause, Sarah took a deep breath and nodded again, more firmly this time. Keanu opened his car door and gestured for her to follow. "I'll drive behind you," he promised. "We'll take it one step at a time." As they drove toward the shelter, Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start. And sometimes, that was all it took to change a life.